Hello everyone. Anyways, hello everyone. Welcome to my comprehensive guide of Sangosha Three Kingdoms. This is a guide specifically geared towards my friend group, but if you ever want to play Sangosha, or if you found across this great board game, feel free to use it at your own discretion. And feel free to just use this guide for yourself. But we are only going to cover the main game for Sangosha. We're not going to be covering all of the Sangosha rules. We're going to be covering the basic Sangosha, not the extra expansion, because those have extra rules and they're much more complicated. But we're basically playing the base game for Sangosha. And hope you guys enjoy. Hopefully you watch through the entire video. I will put link marks to all the videos, and hopefully this isn't more than 2 hours. Without further ado, let me go ahead and start um, our guide. So I'm gonna go through all the basic rules, and basically I'm gonna give you an overview and kind of advanced concept that is written in this book, because we need to clarify some rules, and I need to give out some eye-opening tips that can make the game faster, and so that the games don't last longer than 2 hours. Essentially, I will just give you a quick pointer. Um, there is a reincarnation rule in this game. But if you read the last thing on the note, it says because of the rebalancing Legends of the Three Kingdoms underwent due to its expansions of the games generally end quick enough so that eliminated players don't have to wait for too long, which is why this auxiliary rule isn't used very often. So essentially, our game shouldn't take that long, and that kind of proves it. So here we go. Um, as you may know, there's 4 roles that you play in this game. So there is a monarch, rebel, turncoat, and loyalist role. Each role plays an important part, but essentially the most important role in this game is the monarch. So the monarch is the role that gets revealed first in a game, and is handed out to each player randomly. So when you draw the monarch card, you have to reveal that you're the monarch. The monarch gets special privileges, excuse me, such as an extra health and access to the 3 monarch character king cards. These cards only work if you are the monarch. So this includes Xuan Quan, who is the leader of the Wu dynasty. Not dynasty, just the Wu kingdom or whatever. Liu Bei, which is the leader of the Shu kingdom. And Cao Cao, which is the leader of the Wei kingdom. These guys have special abilities that are able to manipulate characters from the same kingdom and can only be used by the monarch. That's why the monarch is extremely important. The other roles are the rebel and the loyalist. As can be seen from both of these causes, the loyalist's job is to protect the monarch from being eliminated by the rebel scum or turncoat scum. The rebel's job is to just defeat the monarch. If the rebel is able to defeat the monarch before anybody else, or if the monarch just dies in general, the rebel wins. Automatically, that's the only goal that the rebel has to do. The monarch's goal is to survive. So they're teammates with the loyalists, but the monarch has to defeat all the rebels and the turncoats. The turncoats' job is to defeat everybody on the board. So they have to defeat all the rebels, and they have to defeat all the loyalists and the monarchs. Now, the trick here is that when these cards are distributed to these players, these are not revealed. So no one knows if you're a rebel, nobody knows if you're a loyalist, and nobody knows if you're a turncoat. So there's a lot of mind games that are being played around. So essentially, You start with 3 face cards down, and the only role that is revealed when distributed to these characters is the Monarch card. So let's just give ourselves that card for the sake of simplicity, and let us assume that we don't know the role of this character, and we actually don't know because we shuffled it. So what happens after this? So there's key factors, there's important factors to realize why the Monarch card is revealed. Like what advantages and disadvantages does the Monarch have? So to begin the game, we first basically take the 3 cards, the 3 king cards, because these cards only activate with Monarch skills and passives. So these cards are the cards that we know that are going to be released, and then the Monarch can, oh whoops, the Monarch can get a draw of 2 extra cards. So they're dealt 5 cards, 5 character cards. Now, as a Monarch, I would highly recommend, unless if you like playing other characters or heroes, to play one of the Monarch cards at your disposal. So let's say you pick this one. The Monarch immediately reveals this card to everybody. And in this case, once the Monarch has revealed these cards, I think, hold on, I'm not sure if he just puts it back into the deck. Yep, so he gets to keep these cards for now. I don't think he put it back into the deck, but we get to shuffle other character cards, and every other character, pretend this guy's, is every other player is given 3 characters. So obviously we can't see his thing, so let's just pretend that we're this guy. And now we're given 3 characters, right? We're given 3 roles. Now, right now, we're beginners, so we don't really know what characters we want. But I recommend that you guys look at your role card that was distributed. So obviously when you put it into this rectangular box, this is your hand. And when you flip it, only you can see that card. So for example, I'm the teal color right now, so I just take the Monarch card. Let's say it was distributed to me. Oh, I'm the Monarch. I can just reveal it right away. Any other role is not allowed to reveal the role, so they have to keep it in secret, unless otherwise. So this guy's a turncoat, right? So this is the importance of picking your character cards. Why is it important to look? Why is it important that the Monarch reveals this card first? And why is it important that other players can't reveal the cards until everyone else has put the character cards down? So basically in this phase, the only person that's supposed to reveal anything right now is only the Monarch. After the Monarch has revealed his cards, everyone has to look at the cards, and then they get to then the 3 character cards are dealt in their hand. In this case, you have to analyze. You have to analyze the character cards that that were chosen by the Monarch, because it is extremely important to synergize depending on your role, right? The thing is, nobody knows what role anyone's playing because you have it face down. Because if you have it open, for example, you can always try to like cheat it sort of way and like get a feel like, oh, maybe this guy's gonna be rebel, and let me just try to synergize. Oh, this guy's playing this character, let me try to counter him. The reason why you put it down first is so that that advantage is gone. It's all RNG. Like you're just playing the heart of your character's skill ability at this point. But when you see that the Monarch is playing a Monarch card and he picks someone like Liu Bei, you want to make sure that you look at the top left. The top left symbolizes that the kingdom that your hero is in. For example, this guy and this guy are both in the same kingdom. So what does that mean? If Liu Bei can command any other Shu's, so whenever Liu Bei needs to strike, other characters of Shu can do it for him. So if per se I am actually a rebel. And I picked this character because like his ability is, oh, I can use a strike or a dodge. That's pretty cool. But if my but if my role is a rebel and my goal is to kill this guy, it's not gonna work out very well for your teammates because he can manipulate you. This Monarch card is absolute. So in this game, there's basic rules and then there's specialized rules. Specialized skills or rules take over the basic rules. So essentially, this guy can command this character because they're from the same kingdom on the top left. They both have the same like downward stroke. Liu Bei can command this guy to attack his fellow rebels, and he can exhaust like his strikes and dodges, his hand card whenever he pleases. And to me, that is insane because at that point in the game, you're basically screwed. You're a rebel and you pick the same monarch as this guy, and that's not gonna work very well for you. Keep in mind that these cards only work once again when you have the monarch ability. So when you're playing the rebel, you want to play a character that is opposite of him, that is not of the same kingdom, so you don't synergize. And same thing goes for a turncoat. But when you're playing a loyalist, you want you want to synergize with this guy. Now, of course, it comes to RNG when you're getting like a king like a card from the same kingdom, but you want to play those chances, right? If you're a loyalist and you know this monarch's your teammate, the monarch won't know you're a loyalist. But if you pick a card that is um the same kingdom as this monarch, you have really good synergy, and you want to, because then like if you look at this guy's character card, he can give you cards, any number of cards to other players when you give a second card. So this monarch can give you like cards like dodges and attacks for you to attack other people or use it as a dodge. He can basically save your life and fuel you with items that you need in accordance with your ability. So really be careful with looking at your role and analyzing what type of character that you want to pick. That's why it's so important when the monarch chooses his character card that he reveals it first so that other people can synergize or counter the monarch. But the only thing that you should be countering is the monarch, because at the start of the game, um, you're basically like you put the character like down like that after the monarch reveals everything, and then once everyone has their character card down, face down, you just press F, and then there you go. You all reveal the cards as well. So you're basically playing around what the monarch has, because the monarch just has so much control you pick uh if you pick a warrior similar, if you pick someone, a hero from the same kingdom. So really, really pay attention to that. Make sure you don't do that, because we had somebody who picked a hero who was from the same kingdom, and that's basically what happened. But it wasn't anyone's fault, because at the same time, we didn't really think about it. We just kind of like dealt everyone's cards and kind of chose the cards as the monarch chose hers. Like she was the last one to choose the monarch card anyways, which isn't supposed to happen. So we played that incorrectly. Regardless, make sure you take that into account when you're deciding on these rules and factors. So that's a really really important part of the game. So the next part is how do the character cards work? So I'll explain a little bit, but essentially, when you put your role here and your character card here, this is your equipment zone. This is where all sorts of special things will happen, where you'll gain advantages and etc. But we'll start off with health. So how do we distribute health? These are what the health pots look like, and they correspond with the half track assigns on the top of the card. So that's your maximum life points. So if it has 4 there, that means it is 4 here. As a monarch, if you're playing with three or five more people, so for example, here, like this, 5 or more people, you get an extra life point. So let's just assume we have an extra life point like this. And that's basically how you distribute the life points. So they're very simple to navigate around. They're just literally right there. When you flip them, that signifies that your life point is gone, and that's pretty neat. Let's also distribute a random character card, and assuming, nope, they're not the same. And that's if you have more than like 5 players. So, anyways, let's get on to the next one. Anyways, sorry. Let's continue. Let's continue on. After you distribute the life points, the next part is distributing the starting hand. So sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. Starting hand. Yep. So starting hand is simple. Everybody starts with 4 cards. So you just shuffle and then draw, and it immediately gets drawn to your hand here. This is your hand deck. And then you're given a set of cards. So before we start, I'll explain what all the cards will do, like all the basics of the cards. But first, I'm gonna explain how the phases works. So everyone starts with 4 cards, and you go through certain phases. So I'm not sure if I can write it here, but I'll write it here anyways. The first phase is the beginning of turns. So what does this mean? So at the very beginning of your turn, there are some characters that can activate their abilities. This is just strictly, and I say strictly, abilities. So before you do anything else, your character ability can be activated or has to be used. And there's some examples already that are laid out. For example, this card right here, which is called Zhuge Elder, has the ability called Beginning Return. So at the very beginning of its turn, it has the ability to examine cards from the top of the deck. We'll do a more simpler one, which is someone like this. So for example, Zenji also has a beginning of turn called Goddess of Luo. So she can reveal a judgment card, and if it is a spade or a clover, you can take it into your hand, and you can continue repeating the skill until you have a red card. So for example, at the very beginning of your turn, before anything else happens, I can activate this ability because it says right there, begin of turn, and then I can keep drawing. Oh, it's a spade. I can put that in my hand. Oh, it's another spade, no, clover spade. Could put that in my hand. Oh, it's a peach. I can. I put that. I have to put that in my discard pile. And that's how it works. This is an example of one of the beginning returns. For again, this person. For example, this person can examine these cards in accordance to how many characters are still alive. The max is 5. So assuming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 6 of us, so we can only view 5 decks. You actually take the 5 decks into your hand You have to remember where it started. It started right here on Peach. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And his character says you can place any number of these cards back at the top of the deck and the rest at the bottom. So that means I can arrange it to however I want so I can get the card deck to my particular order. So if I don't want the speech, I kind of want the steel before the peach. I can get the strike there, and then I'll put the peaches at the bottom because I don't want anyone getting those peaches right now. And then you have to put these two cards like this and put it on top. And then that ends your beginning of turn. So you just comply with whatever you want, but before anything else, your character abilities go first. Specialized skills will always go first before anything else. And most of the time, these abilities will specify when you can use them. So I recommend to be looking at that. Oh, my throat has been parched. The next one is called the Judgment Phase. I wish I can grab this, but I can't. So the next one is the Judgment Phase. And essentially in the Judgment Phase, you have something called the Judgment Zone. So as you may notice here. So in the Judgment Zone, there's cards that can be placed into that zone that require you to comply with its conditions. So I have two cards here right now that are similar to Judgment Zones, or they're scrolls that can be placed into your Judgment Zone, and you must comply with it before proceeding with the rest of your turns. So one of it is called Lightning, and this Lightning basically forces you to draw a card from the deck before you start the rest of your phases. And when if it is not between 2 spades and 9 spades, you're basically free from lightning and you can pass it on to the next player. This judgment card is then placed into the discard pile and you can move on to your next phase. However, if the lightning does hit, you will take 3 damage. So this is one of those scrolls that have quite an unlucky percentage for you to get hit. The next one is called Acadia. In this case, this has a high percentage of you not missing. If it's not a heart, if you draw a card that is not a heart, you skip the next turn, or you skip a specific phase. In this case, he's talking about the action phase. So we'll talk about that later. But since it is not a heart, that is skipped. Now here's the thing, the beginning of turns is so important for someone like the Stargazing ability, because he can manipulate these cards to his liking. If he can see the first 5 decks and he has a lightning card on him, he can manipulate this so that he can guarantee that he's not hit by the lightning. And at the same time, he can make it so that other players, I'm trying to get a card that, wow. This one. Oh, no. What? No, this one. He can make it so that other players are also can have the potential to be hit by the lightning, or there's a guaranteed hit for the lightning. So basically, for someone like this guy, where at the beginning of the turn he can just set up these phases. For example, the judgment phase won't be effective on someone like him because he can just set it up, and it could be, it could backfire on you as well. Because for example, let's say these are the first 5 cards in the deck, right? Let's say it's put this in that order. Let's say these are the first 5 cards that are put into this deck, right? You use the Stargazing ability beginning of turn. Okay. Yeah. And he's like, okay, you can plan your steps ahead for the next person that can draw. You can say, okay, I can just draw normally like this. So this will be my judgment card. I can arrange these cards so I can draw these 2 cards. This so that he doesn't heal. And then this has to be his judgment card. because he has to draw one card, and I'll just put this at the bottom so he doesn't get this. So you literally rig it so that um, this is at the bottom, these are at the top, the dodge is at the bottom so he doesn't get it. So when you go to the next phase, this is my judgment card. I know that it has to go to the next player. Goes this card, I draw 2, that goes into my hand. And then, oops, the next player has to draw a judgment card. This is his judgment card. It's 8 of spades. 2 and 8 spades. He takes 3 health. Pretending he has 3 health. And this guy next to me just loses like that. It's so important that you pay attention to their abilities. Because they are basically game changers. Beginning of turn ones are extremely dangerous types of heroes, and they always have like big brain outplays and tricks. So I recommend please read them. Pay attention to your character's abilities because it's game changer. It's literally a game changer. The next phase is called the draw phase. So what does this mean? Well, I kind of showed it to you earlier already. But essentially, the draw phase is just simply you draw 2. So after you draw your judgment card, this judgment card is put into the discard pile, and then you just draw 2 cards. That's it. There are characters that have special like abilities. Like for example, in the draw phase, this guy can draw an extra card. So that means instead of just drawing 2, you can draw 3, right? There's also this guy, in which instead of he can only draw 1 less, but instead of drawing 2 normally, he can just activate his ability in the draw phase, and he can only draw 1, making his strikes increase by 2. So each strike is, instead of 1 damage, it's 2 damage, which I'll explain more about how strikes works later. But essentially, that's some special draw phase power. So just make sure when you're activating a power, it'll usually tell you in brackets on when you're allowed to activate it or what phase. And that basically shows like the hierarchy of phases. So if you know that your character doesn't have any beginning of turns ability, then the judgment phase will always be the first one. If you have something in your judgment zone, always before you draw 2 cards, always draw your judgment card, see if it applies, and then draw 2 after. That is my number 1 tip to you guys. Okay, so finally, the last one is the action phase. Action phase. The next one is action phase. And this is the part where you can do most of your biddings, right? At this part, I'll also explain armor, weapons, offensive horses, and defensive horses, so all the equipment and stuff. Let's say after you draw your 2 cards, this is where you can basically play this is where you can basically play to your liking. So this is when you can equip stuff in your equipment zone. So you can put your weapons, your armor, your offensive horses, and your defensive horses. This is also when you can attack other players, in which I'll get into the move set rules later in the game. But essentially the action phase is where all the fun stuff kind of happens. So first I'll explain the basic functions that you can do and like what cards are in hierarchy order. So firstly, in the equipment zone, in the action phase, you can equip your equipment zone. You can use your equipment zone. You can equip any item that you want. And these items include weapons. So as you can see, each weapon will have their special skill. It will have an attack range, and these ranges will allow you to basically hit anyone from the map and determine what players you can reach when you try to attack somebody. In this case, I'll just put this for example. And in the action phase, you can just equip that. You can also equip armors. Armors are pretty good for your defensive sets. It basically allows you to survive. Um, uh, it basically allows you to survive incoming attacks. And each defensive item will have their own unique ability trait to them. Um, but whenever you are attacked, the defense will have to be played first in that action phase section. You can also apply offensive horses and defensive horses. So essentially, these horses are kind of change the relative distance between you and other players, and they correspond with the attack range that you have. So that will be explained in the moveset, but in the action phase, you can just equip anything that you want. Make sure you read the special skill and the range as well, and that can be used to your advantage. Now let's go over the card types. So in the action phase, these are some of the three most basic types that you'll have in your hand. So something like a strike, a dodge, and a peach is something that you'll always have in your hand at your disposal. And these are your main forms of like survivability and basically putting yourself on the map. So for a strike to occur, there has to be a couple conditions. So the strike is the most basic form of attack launch in this game. And if let's say you want to attack someone beside you, you basically have to make sure that they're in range, that you have the proper attack range, and that they're not far away. A strike can only be used once per game unless said otherwise. In this case, we have equipped a crossbow that allows us to play any number of strikes during a striking phase, so we can just keep attacking and attacking. During a strike, a player can have the ability to dodge. In this case, they would have to dodge every time a player strikes, and therefore they won't lose any life points. Otherwise, if they don't have a dodge and a strike goes through, that's one life point taken away, unless otherwise stated. These are just the basic rules. There's some abilities like I talked about, like this character. If they draw one less, their strike is basically 2 life points instead of 1. So that makes them really, really dangerous. And that goes with the basic elements. Finally, the peach is what you use to heal. So a peach can be used towards anybody, doesn't matter where they are. You can heal someone adjacent to you, across from you, beside you, diagonal from you, or you can heal yourself. A peach can also be used if a player is at their last life. If they're literally dead and you want to heal that player, you can use a peach to heal that player for 1 health. You can't use a peach outside of your turn unless that player is actually legitimately dead. and that is the basics of how a peach works. Other things that you can do in your action phases is, of course, use scrolls. Now, there's all sorts of scrolls that you can use, but the most basic ones are a Barbarian and Hail of Arrows. Now, these scrolls can be used consecutively. If you have 2 Barbarians, you can just keep spamming Barbarians, but it's very unlikely that you'll have both of these at your hand. But basically, a Barbarian states that all generals must play an attack. If they don't have attack, they take 1 damage. The Hail of Arrows means everybody must play a dodge. If they don't have a dodge, they take 1 damage. And those are the scrolls that are played. there are special scrolls that can be used um, to negate it, to stop it from happening. And these are some of the. This is one scroll that can be used outside of your turn, in which when a scroll is activated and it's not activated by you, you can use a negate to stop that scroll from happening. For example, if someone plays a Hail of Arrows and you have a negate on your hand, you can use this negate outside of your turn to basically stop it from happening. So the Hail of Arrows um, is just gone. It just does not work. It's negated. Some for delayed scrolls, they kind of have a special effect, like they don't get removed. In that case, a dismantle is probably more appropriate for that because negate just stops it from working on you, and you have to move it to another player. And negate can be used outside of your turn; it doesn't have to be in your action phase. That's one of the special cards that I was gonna get over. Um, And in this case, a dismantle would be more appropriate if you want to get rid of a Judgment Zone card, because you can remove from equipment, Judgment Zone, and hand. Those are the three separate components um, that are at your disposal. And a dismantle can get rid of like Atragams. A dismantle can get rid of, let's say there was a Judgment Scroll or a delayed scroll on your Judgment Zone. You can just get rid of that for yourself. Um, uh, for yourself when it does happen. But in this case, a dismantle is only applicable during an action phase. Other things that you can do in the action phase is force people to attack each other, or you can force them to in a duel. So a mannequin or a manipulated attack is when a character uses strike against another character of his choice within their attack range, or gives their weapon. So if this guy has a weapon, we can manipulate him to attack another person. If they can't, then if they don't have a strike, they have to give you your weapon. So that's one of the scrolls that are pretty good use. Another similar one is like the duel, where instead of you forcing other persons to attack them, you attack them yourself. You force someone. You force someone in a duel. In this case, the duel doesn't have range, which once again I'll go over that later parts of the video. A duel, you can just duel anybody, and they have to fight you, and that's when you want to use a duel, is when they're far away. And then finally we have two special ones and then a steal. So steal is kind of special scroll that you can use in the action phase. Basically, the player there's you can steal any card from their equipment or hand zone and put it into your own card as stated here, but you can only steal when it's in range. So if they're far away from you, you can't do that, and I'll explain more of that later on. So we'll save the steal card for later explanation. And then of course there's two special ones, which is the Peach Garden, which allows everyone to regenerate, and then we have the Trick. Of course, you can, if you have a negate, you can negate a trick. But then again, it's kind of a dick move. I've never seen anyone do that yet. But a trick is a scroll. So if you want to negate it, you can negate it. And as I said here, it negates the effect of drawing two cards. For a Peach card, you can negate that as well. You can negate everybody from healing, which makes the game go faster so that not everyone heals. So those are some of the scrolls that you can use, or I think all the scrolls that you can use in the basic expansion, or just the normal base game in your action phase. So finally, we got our discard phase. After the action phase is over, the next one is discard phase. So this is the importance of how much green health pots that you have. So if you have 5 green health pots, you're only allowed 5 hand cards. So by the time the action phase is over, you can't just accumulate a large number of cards. You can only keep the amount of cards that are corresponding with the amount of life points that you have. So since we have 5, because we're playing the Monarch, we get +1, we're allowed to keep 5 cards. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have to discard one of these cards to continue playing and to be within the valid rules of the game. And this is where it becomes tricky. After the discard phase is over, there is something called the ending of turns, or just basically the last turn of the games. The final phase is the ending of turns. Now, after you discard, you end your turn, but some people will have abilities. And this character that I pulled out has a special ability that allows her to draw a card. So for example, if she was our thing and she only had 3 cards, and we had to discard 2 because at the discard phase it states that we must correspond with the amount of green cards that we have left over. At the end of turn, we can draw a card. That means for her, that discard phase rule doesn't really apply, and she can have 4 cards. She's one of those characters that can have more cards than her life points. And that's practically it for that basic end turn. Now, if you have 2 red, you basically have to make sure that you only have 2 hand cards. So it only corresponds with the green pots. It doesn't matter about the overall health, as long as you have green pots. That's the amount of cards that you're allowed to keep, and that's pretty much it for the phases. So finally, we're gonna get to the last part of the game, which is, I think, the most, I'd say, like, confusing part of the game, but not really. And it's basically about ranges. So let's just delete this character. Let's just kind of clear the board for ourselves. Okay, and let's take one here. And take one here. And another there. Let's assume that these are all, players, and they have roles and etc. And they have their own thing. Just give them their own roles. And then let's give them their own characters. Okay. So this is the part of the game where a lot of people kind of get confused, but it's actually really simple. It's basic stuff. So let's identify what is attack range. So in a default setting without any horses, without any weapons, your attack range is essentially just 1. if your attack range is just 1, then that means you can reach any person beside you, because the distance between the people beside you is just 1 as well, right? Um, and after that, any other person that is adjacent to their position is just increased by +1. So it's gonna be 2 range, 2 range. This is the distance between you and them. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, and then this guy is 3. Because if you want to reach this guy, you have to have. This is how far he is. He's 3 spots away from yours. It's all changes depending on one person. If there was an extra person over here, then this would all change. Like this would all change. Basically, from here to here, it's still 1, 1. From here to here, this is 2, 2. But from here to here, um, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's even, so it's 3. But if you had another person, it would be 7. So that's how that kind of hierarchy completes itself. But in all purposes, the default attack range is always 1, and the default distance between other players is 1 plus 1 is 1, and then plus x. This just means it's 1 plus the different 1 plus the amount of people that are in. So like there's 2, so that's this default 1, 2, and then 3. So it's really simple. It's really just section on 1 plus x, but think of it like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That's the default. So your range will always be 1. But what happens when you add a weapon? When you get a weapon, like I said earlier, you get a special skill and an attack range. We have to pay attention to the attack range because that dictates on who you can use a strike against. When an attack range is declared as 1, it stays as 1. It does not get added. So when you have an attack range of 1, it is not 1 plus 1, it is just simply 1. So unless otherwise stated, your attack range will remain 1 until you get another attack range of 2. So if it is an attack range of 2, it stays to 2. It's not 1 plus 2 equals 3. It is just 2. So that's the nature of how attack ranges work. They don't add anything. They don't subtract anything. They just change. They just simply convert the number to whatever you want it to be. So that is that. Now, like I said before, I'm going to keep this here again just to make it simpler. So what does that mean when there's a distance of 1 beside the players beside you? Even without the crossbow, you can attack them if they have no defensive horse. So that means you can strike them even without a crossbow. But when you have a crossbow, you can strike these guys regardless. The only people that you can't strike are the ones that have above than 1 distance. So this means this is 2 distance, and this guy right across from us is actually 3 distance. So that requires us to get a attack range of 2, right? And in default settings, so we can just attack anyone beside us. The reason why this is only attack range 1 is because of a special skill, by the way. You can use any number of strikes as you can. So like I said earlier, you can just keep attacking and attacking. But how do you diminish that distance other than getting attack range. Because essentially, if you get a blue steel sword, this sword allows us to target this player and this player. But it doesn't allow us to target this player because he's 3 distances away from us. So we have to get a sword that gives us that range of 3. So a bigger range. You can actually increase the distance by getting yourself a horse. So by adding offensive horse, you're actually decreasing the distance between other players by -1. So as we know, this distance between the ones beside us is 1, but with the offensive horse, that decreases 1 minus 1 equals 0. This is also 0. That means this is 2 minus 1, so now that's 1. So the distance between us and that player diagonally is 1, and we now only need a range of 2. So if we had a Zhongli's crossbow, the ones that were diagonal to us that weren't reachable are now reachable because we have a Zhongli's crossbow, which gives us not only the same default range as 1, but because of the offensive horse, it subtracts the 2 distance, -1, and that gives us the ability to reach that because of our attack range of 1. And it decreases that distance to 1, and our range is 1, so we can reach that person diagonal with a strike. I know that's a little bit confusing, but essentially, when you're given an offensive horse, that decreases the distance by 1 to everybody. And then that means after you decrease those distances, you look at the range that you have, and in this case we only have 1, and you're like, okay, what characters have 1 distance that is equivalent to my range? This player has 1, I can reach him. This player is 0, I can reach him. This player is 0, I can reach him. And that's how that works. Now, if a player had a defensive horse, let's say this player, let's say if this player had a defensive horse, that means this player is increased from your relative position, just from your position, by +1. And that would make your offensive horse useless, because then it just reverts back to its original position of 2. But that doesn't mean that everyone around that person is increased by +1. It just means that this player is kind of further away, and that means you would need that +2 sword to reach, or like a rock cleaver to reach, or a +2 attack range of 2 player to reach that sword. If you had no offensive horse, then let's just remove all the lines because now it's going to be tricky. If you're trying to attack this player and you don't have an offensive horse, but he has a defensive horse, the default range was 2 because 1, 2, and then you add +1, you need an attack range of 3. I can still reach that person because my attack range is 3, but if I had something like this, I wouldn't be able to reach her. So anything under an attack range of 2, I wouldn't be able to reach unless I have an attack range of 2 and an offensive horse. So essentially, when you're trying to attack someone during the action phase, just think of this rule set. If you have an offensive horse and they have a defensive horse, then it is nil. So it's going to be reverting back to default distances. And before you even calculate all that, make sure you just count the default distances first. So you go 1, 2, 1, 2. So here, 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 right? So this is just 1, this is just 1, this is just 2, this is just 2, and this is just 3. You know, we got 1, 2, 1, 2. Essentially, you can just skip, you can just go over and be like, okay, I have an offensive horse, but then this person, I want to attack this person. Does he have a defensive horse? No. I have offensive horse with -1. Okay, so that makes it 1. 1 for every other player. So that's 0. This is 2. And then now you're like, okay, I don't have a weapon, but my actual default range will always be 1. So I can actually attack this guy with a strike. And that's how movesets are used. That's why it's very, very important that you understand the basics of how movesets work, because this allows you to figure out if you're allowed to attack a person, etc. Other than that, when it comes to attacking people, once you attack somebody, there are rule sets that come into play. So when a strike happens, sometimes there's like special swords and things that come first, but just remember in hierarchy order that special skills always comes first, and then the second is card skills, and it just goes after that, like all the basic rules. So when a strike happens, and let's say someone strikes you outside of your turn, and you have a defensive card, this defensive card needs to be played first before any rule set. But if, for example, you have a character, okay, hold on. You have a character that okay. You have a character that has like special abilities, then that special ability would go first, and then the defensive skill afterwards. Nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed the guide, because that was all I could do for now, and I hope you all try to take note of everything that happened here, because this is the basics of the game. Some tips I can give you is make sure you understand like the basics of your cards, the basics of how attacking ranges works, so that our games go by quicker. And thank you for watching.